Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting on the bulletin board in Village Hall, by mail to Ridgewood News, The Record, and by submission to all persons entitled to same as provided by law of the schedule, including the date and time of this meeting. Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Hauk.
I'm here.
Councilwoman Newton. Here. Councilman Pucciarelli.
Here.
Councilman Seaton is absent, and Mayor Aronson.
Here. Please join us as we salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join us now in a moment of silence as we honor the American men and women serving in the armed forces, as well as those serving as first responders. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. We will begin with public comments. We are going to break for a special public meeting in a little bit, and then we'll get back to a bunch of discussion items. So with that, anybody's got a comment from the public, question, suggestion? All right.
Good start.
We will move on to our discussion items. Roberta?
Yeah, so these are two discussion items that were, I'm not on.
Am I? Oh, sorry.
My fault.
Did you turn it off?
I did when I was...
Okay. We have two discussion items that we will take into... Are you okay?
It was an April Fool's joke.
It was. Okay. So into the special public meeting, which will start in a couple of minutes. So 6A is a grant request that came into us quite late last week, had a deadline on it. It's approval of a grant application that includes implementing and analyzing a survey which would become the basis for updating the village's open space and recreation plan. This is no cost to the village. It's $1,500 that the grant will be, and the folks doing that survey will be using the $1,500. Mike, I'll talk on behalf of Mike here because Mike and I spoke about it. The committee, the Open Space Committee, thought it was a good price and a good approach to obtaining objective results. And it's about it.
So Mike and I have talked about this in the past, and I think it's a great idea, and I talked about this with Ralph Curry. The only concern I had, but because we're not going to be paying for it, it's less of a concern, is I know you and I think you had talked about publicly about at some point doing a village-wide survey, and the question is, would this be part, could we do some open space questions in that? But because the time is of the essence, maybe we should just go forward with this.
Yeah, and as you said, the committee was going to be working on this anyhow, kind of as a subset, so it just seems to make sense, to me at least. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right.
Okay. The fun one. So this is a request to authorize me to sign a contract with, what's the name of this firm again? Why am I missing? Oh, Easton Armored Services, to sign a contract with them to provide coin services, as well as picking up our cash and checks. They would be replacing Garda, that does that today. The added benefit that we would get from this, obviously, is we would be out of the coin counting business. They would pick the coins up in locked canisters from the coin room, bring it to their headquarters. We're under dual control. They would count the coins and then promptly the next day deposit the coins with Valley National Bank. Despite the fact that the cost of the service is frankly higher than what we were, and we weren't, but what Valley National Bank was paying Garter, Valley has agreed to pick up, based on our relationship with them, pay Eastern as well. So this will be, by the way, as an aside, this is going to be done concurrently with the full installation of the locked canisters and the single head meters and new canister padlocks. And we're looking at a May 1st date.
Okay, so this is not only a safer and more efficient and effective way of doing this, but it's not going to cost us anything additional.
Correct.
Good work.
Just a question. Sure. Excuse me. The frequency of the...
The frequency, they'll be here once a week. on Wednesday, and we'll be rotating through the meters.
What was the frequency of the Guarda?
It fluctuated because let me say two things. The frequency of the coins alone is once a week. The frequency of them coming to pick up checks and stuff will be the same, which I believe is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Monday and Wednesday, depending on volume. I don't exactly remember.
No, I meant the frequency on the coins.
On the coins, yeah. Okay. The frequency on the coins tended to be between around every 2 weeks, just roughly.
That was Guarda, but this will once a week on Wednesdays.
This will be
Okay.
this will be once a week.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Good work. Good job. Yeah.
Well,
So with that, motion to suspend the work session and convene a special public meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Hauk?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes.
Pucciarelli?
Yes.
And Aronson?
Yes. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting on the bulletin board in Village Hall, by mail to the Ridgewood News, The Record, and by submission to all persons entitled to same as provided by law of schedule, including the date and time of this meeting. Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Hauk?
Here.
Councilwoman Knutson?
Here.
Councilman Pucciarelli?
Here.
And Mayor Aronson?
Here.
Councilman Seaton is absent.
Here.
Okay. Because of the fact, it's up to you, but because of the fact that we hadn't discussed them, they are not on a consent agenda. However, if you wish to place them on that, that's up to you. If not, I have to read them in full.
Can we put these on the consent agenda?
Is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Save you.
Okay. The following resolutions, numbered 15-95 through 15-96, will be adopted on a consent agenda with one vote by the village council. They will be read by title only. One is approved grant application to Association of New Jersey Environmental Commissions, ANJAC, and agreement with the Land Conservancy of New Jersey. And the second one is authorized agreement for armored car service. May I have a motion to adopt both of those resolutions?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Hauk?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes.
Pucciarelli?
Yes.
Seaton is absent, and Aronson?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Heather. Motion to adjourn special public meeting and reconvene the work session.
So moved.
Second?
Hauk?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes.
Pucciarelli?
Yes.
And Aronson?
Yes. Now we're back. All right. Discussion items once again.
And we left.
Okay, the first item under parking, or on parking again, is to amend Chapter 265 for some issues that we're having on a street called Corella Court. Actually, I personally experienced this. This is one of the, Chris and I go out and look at neighborhoods and go to residents who have complained or have questions, and so we did go over to Corella Court. The way the parking situation works there now, it causes a lot of concern. Some people can't easily get out of their driveways and back up. Getting emergency apparatus down that street when both sides of the street have cars on them is nearly not possible. After looking at these issues and surveying the folks on Corella and around Corella, we're recommending a time-limited parking zone for Corella, plus a stop sign for traffic exiting Corella as well. This will dissuade particularly school employees from parking on the street, but will also give opportunities for parents when they're visiting the school to use the street. CSAC, I call it CSAC, Citizen Safety Action Committee, in favor of this as well, and you've seen the commentary that was attached to this.
From the prisoners on Corella Court. Very,
Yes, the prisoners.
Very
very
funny.
persuasive.
It's really, I walked the street, I met one or two of the residents. It's really jammed. So,
Great. Questions or comments?
Yeah, it's just odd that the problem is so acute and yet hadn't come before. We hadn't arisen before, hadn't been brought to our attention before.
yeah, I think one of the residents might have in the past, but we really paid attention this time. So,
Thank you.
Anything else? All right.
okay, so now we're on 10A2. This is the second ordinance amendment that has come from Officer Youngberg. We had one, I believe, last week, but he was looking at how our ordinances, the language vis-a-vis yellow painted zones are regulated. These are generally fire zones. And also noted that there's nothing to cite the driver in the village code for that, as well as over-height vehicles, particularly in concern, of concern by the Franklin Avenue trestle bridge. So this is an ordinance, proposed ordinance to amend both the yellow zones and the height restrictions, and create height restrictions in the village.
Great. Any questions or comments? All right. All right, thanks.
Okay, so now we're on budget. I see Dave is here. We have a lot of water here going on, so if there are any issues, we'll call you up. The first one is recommendation for an award to design, get permits, prepare and obtain bids for construction for the replacement of pipes at 4 locations so we can provide adequate water supply for fire protection. These water mains are either exposed from corrosion or broken due to physical damage. Funding is in the capital budget.
Any questions or comments? All right.
You'll note it's been out there for a while. When I was speaking to Frank about this, he just mentioned that the situation has just deteriorated. Okay, I'm sorry, 10B2, this is to award a professional services contract to update our distribution planning study, as well as updating our 20-year capital program forecast. This is in concert with the New Jersey DEP. It is an amount not to exceed $15,500. Funding is contained in the water capital utility budget. I would just note, this is kind of interesting, because when we think about capital planning, and we've mentioned this as a strategic issue during our budget reviews of the village, the way we handle it in Ridgewood Water is we have a consultant that comes in and works with us in coming up with a capital plan that will now take us to 2035. And, I guess in my own head, I'm thinking, we should think about this from the village's perspective and infrastructure from the village's perspective as well. But this is the water side.
Any questions or comments? No. All right.
Okay, the next one's fairly mundane. It's a resolution for the purchase of various supplies and equipment under the State of New Jersey Cooperative Purchasing System. We anticipate also exceeding, because we do every year, the statutory limit of $17,500 for these. So it's in need of a council resolution to continue purchasing these, both for Ridgewood Water as well as Ridgewood.
Great. Any questions, comments? Nope. All right.
Okay, the next one is an extraordinary unspecifiable expense. Since this has very limited numbers of service providers and a complicated nature, it's an extremely limited service. So this is to do leak surveys to see where we're leaking water throughout the network. There's a lot of other information in here. As you know, we've recalibrated all of the meters. So
great.
I don't have much more to say about it.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, the next one is, this is another water contract under extraordinary unspecified service. This is to pay, if you recall, this came up earlier last year when we had a light problem at Veterans Field, when the lightning system fried and was rendered impossible, and we did all the repairs quickly. We actually did not get the invoice for the temporary lights that we were using. Finally, we got a collection notice, I believe, and as a result, we need to pay this bill. So, but it was for the temporary lights that were there until we fixed the lights.
Any questions or comments?
It's just interesting to me that the cost to repair the lights was around the same price, I think.
I think that's probably right.
Yeah, and so those temporary lights are expensive. That's probably why permanent lights are...
But remember, when we repaired the lights, we did a lot of that work in-house. Signal did a lot of that work also, so that labor part of that was, I believe, the labor part of that was minimal too.
Right, yeah.
Otherwise, I think it would have been more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long were the temporary lights on? Like a month?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Do you, Janet?
10/13 to 11/09, just under a month.
Oh, it's here.
Yeah, October 13th till November 9th. So I guess for the football season, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Right?
Okay, 10B6, this is a recommendation to award a sole source purchase for Graydon Pool utilizing AQ C28 water clarifier. I think it was mentioned last week that the water quality at Graydon has looked better, and this is one of the reasons, and this is the recommendation of the engineering department.
Any questions or comments?
Nope. Good.
All right.
Okay, I guess the last one. This is just authorizing Mary Jo to mail 2 notices of tax sale to the property owner in lieu of publishing 2 legal notices. This is $25. I'm not sure. Maybe I was looking at this saying, do we really need to bring this to the council for 25?
Yeah. What if we vote no?
But yeah, she's nodding yes. So
Oh, for publication purposes.
yeah.
Great, thank you.
Do you mind
All
if
right.
you just,
And
excuse
that's
me,
it.
Paul?
I'm sorry?
Do you mind just answering one question, Roberta? I don't mean to go backwards. Just on the 10B4, I had a question I missed, and that was on the
10B4.
the leak survey. Sorry.
Sure.
Did we ever establish the value of that water? Because it's like unaccounted for water, there's a value to that?
No, Dave, maybe you want to respond to this, but, I did have a conversation with Frank about this, and we do not know. And he actually said that the question was not, I don't mean to say it this way, but was not that important. This is the whole issue of how much water leaks out of the system, and as a result, how much revenue do we lose?
Well, I don't have the statistics with me, but we sell the water for just north of $4.50 per 1,000 gallons. And since we're pumping at the minimum 5 million gallons a day, that's quite a bit of water. That would be a lot of lost revenue.
So, but if what this says, Ridgewood water historically has high levels of the unaccounted water, is there a way to put a value on that?
Yeah, there would be a way to, we know, essentially the way you find unaccounted for water is take the difference between what we know we pump from the source and how much is measured at the end at homes and businesses.
So is that an important number for us to have, given?
It's an important number for any water utility. It's we always try to get the number as low as possible. Unaccounted for water doesn't necessarily mean unmetered water, because some uses are known, they aren't metered, but we have an approximate idea of what they are. But the really unaccounted for water is probably leaks.
Okay.
It's probably what? I didn't hear you.
Leaks.
Yeah.
So is that a number that we could have before us at some point, that the value is?
Yeah, we come up on a yearly basis, we come up with a percentage that we think is unaccounted for,
Right.
and a percentage of the total amount. So we could calculate out what we would retail that water for.
But I guess it's a tricky question also, as I'm thinking about it, because the value, it's not like we're losing revenue necessarily.
That's exactly what Frank said, that we're not losing revenue necessarily at all.
It's the value of that water if we sold it, but it's not necessarily the cost of
Right.
the water
True.
to us.
True.
That's exactly the...
But there's still a number on that. I just don't know what it is, but it's...
Well, probably a more interesting number would be the cost of producing that water that we lose,
That's
Exactly.
yeah.
which is a different number, yeah.
Which is, yeah.
I didn't anticipate that. Okay, so I didn't mean to go backwards either. So if you don't mind, if you could email that information
Sure.
to us, and this way, it seems to me that it's a piece of this packet that is missing for me anyway. So I appreciate
Okay.
it. Thanks, Dave. Thank
Sure.
you.
And David, I guess now that the meters are converted, almost newly all converted, right? Are we likely to find that the unaccounted for water volume has gone down?
It's too early to tell
Yeah,
because,
it is.
we haven't really, but we're finding that the meters that were removed were actually extremely accurate. We test every meter for accuracy when it's removed from service, and it's really quite remarkable how accurate they were even after 15 years.
So it's possible a good amount of the unaccounted for water is literally leaking. It's not being paid for. It's leaking out of the system.
We've done leak surveys in the past. It's been probably 5 or 6 years since we did it, but it's surprising how continuous these leaks crop up, and they're individually they're quite small, but they accumulate. They mount up, and it's sort of an ongoing process for a water utility.
Great.
Thanks.
Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, we are to the review of our April 8th, 2015 public meeting agenda.
Okay, we have 4 proclamations. We have one for Tree Planting Month and Arbor Day. We have one for LAX Day. We have one proclaiming May as Building Safety Month, and then also proclaiming May 4th to 10th as Drinking Water Week. We have introduction of ordinances. One is for vehicles and traffic for definition of loading zones. Another is amending vehicles and traffic for Corella Court for a stop sign as well as 2-hour parking limit. And the next 2 that you have on your draft agenda are actually combined, which is the delineation and clarification of yellow zones and also the establishment of vehicle height restrictions. Public hearing, we have amending Chapter 145 fees for the construction code fees. We also have amending Chapter 249 for required deposit and maintenance period for streets and sidewalks, and also amending Chapter 3, Article 8 for residency requirements. Under resolutions, we have award of contract for dewatered sludge hauling services, award sole source contract for bioorganic catalyst for Graden Pool, award professional services contract design of replacement water mains at stream crossings, award professional services contract for the update of the distribution planning study and 20-year capital program forecast for Ridgewood Water, award contract under state contract for purchase of hardware and related items for Ridgewood Water, award extraordinary unspecifiable services, contract for emergency repairs to Veterans Field lighting system, award extraordinary unspecifiable services contract for distribution leak survey, awarding contract under state contract approved shared services agreement for registered environmental health services with the Northwest Bergen Regional Health Commission, authorize the signing of the settlement agreement in Park versus Village of Ridgewood, approve acceptance of Municipal Alliance grant funds, approving a change order for installation of drainage system improvements on Marshall Street, approving Building Department Amnesty Program, approving Girl Scout Juniors Troop Bronze Award Project, which is planting of trees at the playground on Veterans Field, approving the Eagle Scout Project, learning on the trails of Habernickel, approving the Adopted Tree Program, accept the corrective action plan for the 2013 annual audit, and authorizing the charge for the mailing of the tax sale notices. Do you wish to have any of these resolutions off of the consent agenda?
No, but I actually have an item that I wanted to present for a table next week, is to have it actually removed from the ordinance 3470. And if it's all right, I really don't know procedure or protocol, but I'd like to just read my reason for that, if you don't mind.
Wait, I'm sorry, what do you want
Okay,
to do? I'm sorry.
3470, amend Chapter 3, Article 8, residency requirement. Okay, so I'm just going to read some of the work that I compiled on this, so you'll better understand why I'll ask to have that removed and tabled until further discussion. Regarding a request I made at the March 4th, 2015 work session pertaining to the policy item number 1, amendment to residency requirement ordinance, specifically and only involving civilian employment opportunities, my request for all civilians hired from July 1st to date remains open and unanswered. Additionally, on March 18th, I made a request for clarification on which ordinance would be in full force and effect when the August 2015 change was determined to violate state civil service rules. Since then, I've been advised civil service has not responded to the numerous requests by the village for clarification. Fortunately, When I contacted Civil Service this week on Monday, they responded immediately, actually to my first try, and advised me in writing the only ordinance currently on the books in Ridgewood and the recorded at the state level is a residency preference for these civilian employment opportunities. Furthermore, Civil Service was very generous with their time and elucidated further on the meaning of residency preference and what the term residency requirement refers to. The three-tier preference system simply indicates if all applicants are equal, a preference must be shown in the order of the tier. Nothing in that Civil Service language precludes the village from hiring the most qualified candidates. In fact, it simply allows a default preference when all applicants are equal. When using the three-tier system, the residency requirement simply outlines what requirements must be met to establish residency, whether it be at the village level, county, or state. These are crucial differences in how civil service rules are understood and interpreted, or misunderstood and misinterpreted. It is my belief there is a fundamental misinterpretation of these two items, and it would be prudent for this council to table any vote next week until further discussion is had at a public work session and/or a meeting is organized with Civil Service, which I'll happily attend, to clarify these very distinct differences, preference as it relates to residency requirement. Finally, in my email communications with Civil Service, it was revealed a request was made by the village appointing authority to hold open civilian employment opportunities until a change to the ordinance had been secured. I was dismayed that the village appointing authority would make this February 24th request one day before the February 25th closed session and never mention or advise council of such a request as it pertains specifically to this ordinance change. Furthermore, the request denied employment opportunities to those legally eligible under the existing ordinance's three-tier system and further delayed filling of vacancies within the village. Again, I'd like to table this vote next week as the wording will continue to be incorrect and misused due to the inappropriate application of the word requirement to an ordinance where it was simply the word preference. Thank you. And I have all my emails here, so if anyone would like to review.
Have you shared this with anybody before?
Actually, you know what? I actually just typed it and printed my emails and organized it before I came. I was a little pressed for time, so I'm happy to do that.
Because you said you received it on Monday. I was wondering if you shared it with Roberta or Matt or Heather, who does our civil service.
No, as I said, I have a series of emails. I'm sorry, Tuesday, whatever day is Monday. But it took me a little while actually to read through it, assimilate the information, and in fairness to me, I don't really do this full-time, so I had to just put it together and type it, so I felt more comfortable. Actually, I will say this. Given that my requests were made in writing on February 17th for clarification, and I received a flurry of emails for every reason that the information was not provided to me, I felt far more comfortable bringing this up in a public meeting than
Sure. Who did
anywhere
you
else.
receive those emails from?
Yes.
The flurry of emails.
Well, the initial flurry of emails that I'm referring to are the emails per my request for clarification on which ordinance would be in full force and effect, and those emails came from Beth Hinsdale, and my request for the list of employees that were hired between July 1st and present, and under what civil service civilian titles they were hired, and how that related to whatever existing ordinance would have been in full force and effect. And those emails back and forth conveyed a response that I was not going to have that information provided to me, albeit I could have just Oprah'd it, and I know that it is readily available, it is public record, but I didn't think as a councilwoman here in the Village of Ridgewood I should have to Oprah materials to make my records complete. And the flurry of activity from civil service was, I'm going to say her name, Heather probably knows her.
But the emails, I mean, were they just with Beth here, or were they?
Beth, and actually you were all emailed on those two, and the emails from civil service are from a Michaela Ridolfino, and she also forwarded me correspondences from a Susan Cardone. So again, and I think the important part in this, rather than we can discuss this, I think the important part is that there is a fundamental misunderstanding between Ridgewood preference because there is nothing that requires us to hire anything less than the most qualified candidate. It simply states that when all candidates are equal, we default to at least a preference, but there is nothing that precludes us from hiring the most qualified individual, and it's not a Ridgewood residency requirement that compels us to hire someone. The residency listing is only a New Jersey statutes that you have to meet these requirements. These are the requirements that actually quantify or qualify you as a citizen or a resident. Those requirements are only the portion of the statute that establishes the residency. The actual law states it's a preference. It's a resident preference in a 3-tier system, but you are capable of hiring the most qualified employee. And again, Civil Service was also good enough to put that in writing for me, so I appreciate it. And I would hope that everyone, that we don't move forward with an ordinance change without fully comprehending the materials that we have in front of us. And I think, through no fault of anyone, I just think that there's an interchanging of two very, very different words: residency requirement and residency preference. And the preference is part of the ordinance in the 3-tier system, and the requirement is only the part of the statute that identifies the criteria that qualifies you as a resident. So I appreciate it, and I think it's really an important opportunity for us to better understand civil service and how this whole process works.
Sure, thank you. Heather?
Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment that even though it is a residency preference, you're correct, there are many times that there are so many residents, and there is a rule of 3, that you're not going to be able to go outside of the Ridgewood residents who are listed, because you have 4, 5, 10 Ridgewood residents before you get to Bergen County residents. And in fact, we've found that many times the Ridgewood residents score lower than those in Bergen or even contiguous counties. So it's not necessarily true that you can necessarily get the best qualified in the sense that you have to start with the Ridgewood resident preference, and it depends on the number on the list, because you're still limited to the rule of 3.
So let me just say this, and I will study this further. I will peel back every layer to that onion.
That's
I
fine.
promise you.
That's fine.
Until we're all crying. No. But I think the importance here is that even that tidbit of information, the difference, just you said preference, and we've been using the term requirement, and in the ordinance it states requirement versus preference, and those are two distinctly different words. And I really think our due diligence requires us to be prudent moving forward and really understanding the nuances of the law, and to make sure that we are doing this the right way. And there is nothing in this that precludes us from hiring the most qualified applicant. And in fact, and again, I will go right back to civil service on it. I am happy to study it on behalf of everyone. I'm happy to work with you on it. But I really think that this was a very obvious distinction between the two, and I can see where they would be easily confused, but it is a very, very significant difference in the words. So I appreciate it. So, and I just think that it's prudent, again, to table this so that you and I can sit down and go through all of this and maybe have a conference call with civil service and go from there.
I mean, I think the key point here is that we want to hire the best qualified person, and I think what Heather just said, and again, I have said it before, civil service, I think, is complex. I know you said at the last meeting it's really not that complex. We have gone through so many civil service issues, Heather and myself, in the last 5 months, and when you speak to people at civil service, they don't necessarily all say the same thing and say it twice. And I think that, and you know, one of the frustrations in being in this role is the inability to really move quickly and adroitly. And again, we had 2 meetings today on this relative to another issue with civil service. And I go back to Heather's point. If in fact there are a lot of Ridgewood residents and they're the first 3, it does preclude us from looking at the most qualified candidate. That's a true statement. Okay, so I don't want to take away from Heather's statement by saying, well, it's equal. It's not. If you can't get to the 4th candidate or the 5th candidate who happens to be from Totowa, right? So I think that's what you were saying, right, Heather?
And I can appreciate that, so let me respond. That piece of information, as we are looking at our ordinance and making these changes, that piece of information was not supplied to us in all of this detail and to that detail. And it is important, and as much information as we need to make a decision in the best interest of the Village of Ridgewood, really, we should be supplied with that information. And again, one of the key pieces to this is the interchanging of the word preference to residency requirement. So again, there are these little nuances, but I think we really have the right to have as much information as possible, and this is the first time I think I heard Heather use the word preference as opposed to requirement. And again, I go back to one other item in my notes. The fact that any open civilian employment opportunities were held back until a change in this ordinance was secured. I'm surprised that the appointing authority, since that was on the 24th of February, I'm surprised that we weren't even told of that. I think it's a very big piece of information that wasn't supplied, and that actually civil service is also not retroactive, by the way, so that's another issue to deal with. So there are a lot of nuances in the law that we really have the right to absorb and comprehend and understand and have placed before us as we're making these decisions. But going back to this, and I just want to read it, that this request to hold open civilian employment opportunities was a request to deny employment opportunities to those legally eligible under the existing ordinance in the three-tier system, and also delayed filling vacancies. And so if the vacancies are critical, I can't imagine why we would do that. In fact, if you had 100 Ridgewood residents and they weren't qualified, the 3 number wouldn't even matter. So I think it's really important, to cut to the chase, I think it's very important to have all the information, all the facts in front of us before we're asked to make an ordinance change. So I appreciate
Heather,
it. Thank you.
Can you please, because Susan has said that twice, and I'm not clear on this, can you please comment on holding open civil service opportunities?
Say it again, on the what civil service?
The 224 decision to hold open civil service opportunities.
Basically, what they had said is that that we had our resident preference with the tiering in existence, and then they had asked as to whether or not we were going to change our ordinance. And the answer was we were in the process of considering an ordinance to change it to the state of New Jersey. And then they said you can have an option to then hold your list for the change in the ordinance, or else go ahead and continue with the existing ordinance, which has various tiers. Mm-hmm. And the decision was made to hold them because the ordinance was in the process already of being introduced and being considered for adoption.
And there was not much of an impact at the time.
Well, there aren't a lot of lists that are being held.
Right.
It's maybe 1 or 2.
Okay, so again, let me respond to that. The date on the correspondence with Susan Cardone is February 24th. The day before the closed session agenda item, residency requirement, it was the day before. And this correspondence relates to holding open those titles. So it wasn't that the council hadn't even met, hadn't even known. I mean, you had the December 29th letter, the one that stated excluding public safety, but the council hadn't been provided with that letter. We had as a rule, I mean, unless somebody else here, and in fairness to the village council, I honestly don't think everyone here is really just basing it on information in front of them. In fairness to everyone here, my colleagues on council, they just couldn't have known this information. They didn't. I don't believe that they had this.
Which information? The information
that on
December
February
29th?
24th, before a work session meeting ever occurred, that there was that whoever the appointing authority is had an email correspondence to hold those titles before a meeting was even had. So I think that this is something that we need to scrutinize and have a discussion about in a public meeting, in a public work session, and to make sure that we get this right.
So I am the appointing authority, and I did not send a memo. I did not. I don't recall ever sending a memo to Civil Service, let me just say that.
Well, I don't want to state the names that are in the email, but it just refers to the appointing authority making the request, but in fairness, it was not.
Yeah, it would be good to see that stuff ahead of time, but I will tell you, as the village manager and as our Civil Service expert, Heather and I continually make decisions. We made decisions today. It's in our purview to make decisions on people and on human resource issues. And if we made that decision, we made it for a reason after brainstorming and thinking through it. So, I take that as my responsibility as village manager. I rely on Heather for her civil service expertise, and I just stand by it.
Can I jump in here?
So
I think there's Councilwoman Newton raises some questions about, and she has in the past, about sort of past practice, I guess, and whether that matched what exists on our books. But as I understand, the exercise last summer, and again most recently, is to clarify our ordinance. And for some of us, that clarity is that we want to make sure that we get the best. We hire the best in Ridgewood, period, whether they live in Ridgewood or not. So I don't see, and please, I'd love to hear people's views on this, while we still want to get clarity on the situation that Councilwoman Newton has raised, I don't see that there's a reason not to go forward with the adoption of this ordinance, because we want clarity from as soon as possible. And again, we want to be in a position to hire the best, whether they live in Ridgewood, whether they live in Fairlawn, to hire the very best, period.
You can't vote tonight to carry anyway. It's on for a public hearing next week. So that would be the time that the discussion and then vote to carry would take place.
Right.
Okay.
If I could hear, because I'd love to hear, again, Roberta and Heather's views on this, and then all council members sort of weigh in.
Well, I would really like to see this document that Susan read from. It's a little hard to follow that entire, it was a couple of pages. So, in order to assimilate it and look at it, I would like to see it.
Absolutely. And just as for the record, I just want to make the point that moving forward on it would just continue to have language that is wrong, because the language in our paper in front of us is wrong already. So
Did the person in civil service say it's wrong?
Yes, we reviewed the language. And I have our emails.
This is what I'd like, then let me make this request then. If Heather, as our civil service expert, and Roberta as our village manager and appointing authority, if you can check to see if the language in the ordinance is correct. If it is, I would recommend that we move forward with it next week. If there's a problem with it, to Councilwoman Newton's point, then we probably should table it. Does that seem fair?
Yes, very fair.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to see, a lot of information has been presented, and then to comprehend all that without having seen it in advance and without reading it, it's difficult. So I certainly would be in a better position to say, how I feel about the vote next week, if I had the benefit of everything some of which has been read to us, but not all of it. So yeah, I think it's important that be circulated so we can get a better handle on it. It's looks like a lot of homework's been done. It's a lot of information, and more than can be digested in this form.
And I respect that, and I absolutely, unequivocally agree, and I will certainly circulate it first thing tomorrow morning, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Go ahead. You have two microphones.
I bite my tongue, but I feel like this is the second time that the council's been unprepared to respond to challenge to our expert authorities, and it makes me feel a little hobbled when I'm blindsided at a council meeting with new information on items that we've discussed in the past, and then all of a sudden, on the night of the council meeting, we're presented with a bunch of facts, and we're just sitting here like dumb ducks because there's all this information on a piece of paper which you're reading to us, which you could have circulated to us before the meeting. And it just would have given, we're sitting here mute because we can't refute information that we didn't even have time to review. I generally always have trusted the advice of the experts, and I think your questions aren't just challenging the expert advice of our clerk, but also our attorney in the wording of the ordinance. So I just get a little anxious because this is okay. I think it's great. It's our role as council people to deep dive into, everything we have to dot the I's and cross the T's. But the way we do it has to be done with a little bit more sensitivity to your colleagues so that we have an ability to fully flesh the issue in a more meaningful way at a public meeting. And also not to embarrass all of our staff members.
So thank you, Gwen, and let me respond to that. I don't really find any reason for anyone on this village council to refute anything that I said. Actually, I think it was really important to have a greater level of information when we're being asked to make these changes. And by the way, just for the record, everyone was CC'd on Beth Hinsdale's email after, I want to say the first request went to March 3rd, and that email was responding to a March 17th, and from March 17th, and everyone was CC'd on that email, on Thursday afternoon, this past Thursday, Beth Hinsdale said, we are not giving you this information, we cannot get a hold of civil service, so and to get clarification on which ordinance would be in full force and effect. Really, you're making a statement, and I can appreciate what you're saying, but I think it's misdirected because it's directed at me, who really sought this information fairly by way of emails over the past close to a month. I could have Oprah'd for the information, and in fairness to me, information was withheld. I made requests for information multiple times, and everyone was on that email circulation. So I'm not asking anyone on this council to refute anything. I'm asking everyone on this village council to support me in saying, let's get as much information as possible to make good decisions on behalf of the village residents. That's all I'm asking, and I think in fairness, I was entitled to that information and should have had it given to me the very first time I asked for it, and after a half a dozen emails, I hope I didn't embarrass anyone, but I have to say, I was feeling a little upset that I would ask for information so many times and be denied access to that information. I will file my Oprah request tomorrow morning.
So you're saying that our labor attorney also was withholding information from you?
Well, she didn't withhold it. She told Heather not to give information. The information I have right here that I just read, that I had to call civil service on Monday to get the information I requested from Heather, and Beth Hinsdale sent the letter on Heather's behalf, and everybody was on the receiving end of it. So I don't understand. I am not the person I'm just trying to get information to make a good decision. So I'm not asking anyone to refute what I'm saying, and I'm not asking anyone to challenge what I'm saying. I'm just saying, as a matter of fact, I asked for information in the beginning of March. I was denied that information. I asked again. I emailed. Beth Hinsdale said they can't get a hold of civil service to get clarification on which ordinance was in full force and effect, and that was now for 2 weeks. And the bottom line is, it took me an email, and a half an hour later, I had a response. So I don't know. I don't really know what to make of it, quite frankly. But if I were, as my colleagues on village council, collectively, together, we should really be pretty upset with this, honestly.
So can I just like to say something. Susan, you said that you sent copies of this to everybody, right? Copies of your requests went. to everybody.
Beth Hinsdale CC'd everyone on the
I
email.
know she did subsequently, but when you asked and you suggested this report, that your colleagues knew, correct?
I asked in the closed session last week, yes.
Okay, so I have the email here, and I hate to do this, I really do, but this is an email from Councilwoman to Heather asking for, per my closed session request, kindly forward a list, blah, blah, blah. The last sentence, because I didn't know, because Beth Hinsdale had to send it to me, is, finally, as this is my request, kindly do not discuss with anyone or further distribute without first a courtesy call to me.
Okay, so let me respond again. Roberta, thank you for bringing that up. And the reason for that was very simple again. I asked Heather on March 3rd for information at this public meeting. I fully anticipated being in receipt of that information within about 2 weeks. At the next closed session meeting I attended, having not received the information, it was the very first time I learned that Beth Hinsdale instructed Heather not to give me the information I requested. Therefore, my request to Heather was to not distribute or discuss without at least, at minimum, a modicum of courtesy, was to at least let me know that this information was going to be shared and what the status. And I don't think that's unreasonable given the fact that I walked into a closed session and, surprise, only first after 2 weeks learned that Beth Hinsdale told Heather not to comply with my request for information that, by the way, was readily and is and continues to be readily available public record. Thank you.
So I would suggest, again, if we could get clarity on whether or not the language in the ordinance before us is fine to adopt. If there's any problem, if Roberta or Heather, if you could check that with Civil Service. Again, if the language in the ordinance is fine, I would say we should move forward with it next week. That doesn't necessarily answer all the other questions about prior to this evening and going back to whenever the date was. So, to be continued?
Yes.
Okay, great. And now we will go to the manager's report.
So I was going to start this with a joke, which I don't really feel like doing right now, which was, there is no village manager's report today. April Fools. Okay, so...
Pull out the book.
So here it is.
That's why you didn't distribute it?
And that's why I did not distribute
Oh,
it.
that was good. You really thought ahead of this.
And because we were running late. I mean, that was the other issue. Okay, manager's report. Talk a little bit about the 2015 budget. We have our third budget meeting on Monday, April 6th. We have probably gotten about 80% of it together, and we will spend some time on issues that we didn't spend a whole lot of time on the last couple of weeks. One of them is a full report on revenues. We're going to talk through revenues. We will also present to you a final capital proposal. That proposal has moved around a little bit. It's actually gone down a little bit. We're going to present, at this point, I think we're going to wind up presenting 3 scenarios for the budgets. One will be, frankly, we're going to have a recommended scenario. We will have a scenario that's a little more premier, and then we will have a scenario that is minus some of the investment spending. So that's kind of how we see it. We'll also have one more opportunity to get your feedback on both the parking utility, which we know is a separate budget, and Ridgewood Water, which we know is a separate budget. So, and we will discuss library recommendations. So that's all on...
Discuss what? What was it?
Library. What we recommend as far as library, and go through the numbers a bit. So that's all scheduled for Monday. I think, Heather, we're 5 to finish, right?
Right.
The official introduction to the budget is planned for April 22nd, with adoption and final public hearing on May 27th. These will be televised live, as normal. Stable renovation is going really well. You may have noticed that. This is a new 2-story addition, barrier-free access to 6 new bathrooms on the first floor, second floor, new meeting space, updated kitchen, and this Project is on schedule to meet the opening of the Recreation Department summer camp and other summer programs. We again want to say thank you to the Bulger Foundation for a very generous gift. On time, professionally done, weekly status meetings. It's been a great experience for the team. Pothole repairs. We have the app, and one can also call. To date, we have fixed 900 potholes.
Wow.
In police and fire, we're starting to interview candidates for positions. Each department's looking for 3 slots. The plan is on the police side to make 1 hire off the civil service list and 2 interdepartmentals. Fire will hire 3 off the civil service list. A little bit of information on outdoor cafes. We were, I guess I would say, a little more proactive this year. We've sent packets out to many of the restaurants, even I think some that don't have al fresco dining right now, about renewing their licenses. There's an application as well as a reminder that we need an unobstructed 52-inch pedestrian passageway maintained at all times. We also have told them, and I've put separate emails to the Guild as well as to the Chamber, that we're in the process of redrafting this ordinance. We've redrafted this ordinance once, and we're looking at it again based on looking at other municipalities and best practices for al fresco dining. We didn't have enough time to bring it this season. We will definitely do stricter enforcement this season. If you recall, I guess last season, in the middle of the season, Chris and I did what I call a nurturing walkthrough of the sidewalk cafes, pointing out issues and problems. So this year, we'll be in stricter enforcement mode for that. We are putting the finishing touches to the Village of Ridgewood website. A couple of us did a review last week. We spent a couple hours on it. I think we're going to be rolling out shortly, kind of finally. Yeah. It's looking good. The e-ticket project, which never seems to end, is now scheduled, hopefully, to be done in about 4 weeks. Just want to remind everybody that Tom was here last week, and I just want to keep on saying this, that we're proposing a permit amnesty program for residential work that was previously completed, perhaps without the required permits. We just want to make sure that there's no safety hazard. So we will be giving homeowners the opportunity to apply for permits before they're subject to administrative action. There's a letter and a news release that's going out that discusses this more fully. North Walnut Redevelopment Zone. I think I said last week that we were in the process of selecting a financial firm to do some financial analysis on 2 of the proposals. Matt and I, and who else was with us, Matt? Blaze, I'm sorry. Matt, I, and Blaze met with the firm. We were really satisfied. I think Matt was following up with them today. I don't know if you have an update. Yesterday.
What date other than they're going to be sending us a proposal to consider?
We have heard back from one of the developers, Kensington, who has already agreed to have the financials in their proposal evaluated and also to reimburse the village for that evaluation. We have, I personally have spoken to Langen, and they will be getting back to us early next week on their proposal and their next steps as well. Okay. We added that little section of In a Nutshell last week, so I just want to talk a little bit about paving in a nutshell. Paving, if all goes well, and if the contractors deliver and they get here, we will be having 2 separate contracts underway to do spring, summer, and fall paving. The streets that we pave, the residents get a hand-delivered notice providing contact information for the village engineering staff overseeing the paving. This, I mean, you can't see this, but this is a list of the streets that we're currently anticipating paving this year based on really an increased paving number. And this list is currently out on the website, so you can see it, or tomorrow morning it will be, no, it's now, it went up tonight. Just a couple of points about paving, kind of a little primer. Paving really depends on who owns the street. If it's a village street or a Bergen County road, obviously if it's a village street, it's us. If it's a county road, our engineering department does contact the county of problems and requests for resurfacing. Primary and secondary roads get higher priority, we know that, for resurfacing than tertiary. We do go out and do a pavement management rating every year, and we rate the condition of the paving of the streets. They're assessed at the end of each winter, normally for deterioration. We also keep track of complaints that we get from residents, and we take that into account. We also get observations from our own staff in streets, and we take that into account. We work with the utilities in the village. So, for example, if PSE&G is doing gas main work on a street, we will avoid paving that if we know. And we have a paving history for the last 20 years of streets and what streets have been paved. Most streets just get the resurfacing of asphalt, and the curbs are handled as well. If there's drainage issues or grading issues, we do a more expensive reconstruction if funds allow that. We also take into account ADA sloped ramps when we're resurfacing to make sure they're compliant. Pavement markings, obviously, are redone after a street is paved. And that's kind of basically it. In talking to Chris about this, this takes a lot of focus in engineering, especially with this amount of paving that we're doing. So we have staff that really works opposite and supervises the work. This is a big year. It's going to be about $3 million worth of paving this year. So we do feel strongly that we're going to make a big dent in our less good streets. So that's paving.
Good stuff. Thanks.
From a rip from the headlines perspective, I think I've sent out 3 group emails to the staff, but we did see that we had a front page article in the Bergen Record regarding our water pollution control facility and our conversion of sewage gas into a valuable energy source. There was the front page article, and then we had an editorial in yesterday's record. Today's record? Yesterday's record. That ended with the statement, more municipalities and public institutions around the state should follow the example provided by the Ridgewood sewage treatment and seek out ways to harness methane and to use it effectively to meet everyday energy needs. We had, I think, we were covered on three news stations. So I think the kudos are really well warranted. This was a great example also of a private-public partnership where we didn't put up any capital to get this done, and we're reaping benefits from both we're making enough electricity to cover hours plus more, and I think it's great.
And it's good for the environment.
And it's good for the environment. Meet the Manager will be Thursday. It will be a Thursday again, 4:30 to 7:30. I want to apologize to the public. Saturdays in the month of April, my daughter does crew at Lehigh, and I'm at crew meets on Saturday mornings all over New Jersey and Pennsylvania. So we're doing the Meet the Managers on weekday evenings in April. Upcoming events, I think I mentioned this last time, College Club annual book sales. Yesterday, today, 2nd and 4th. Village is closed on the 3rd. No recycling or sanitation. It's reflected in the calendars that way. Easter in the Park, April 4th, 11 to 2. Yard waste pickup, April 6th, starts up. We are looking at how we're doing yard waste, and I'm not sure yet, but we may have some changes to the schedule based on a different thought process around yard waste. We have a free shred day at the recycling center on April 11th, and then Westside Presbyterian Church on April 12th, we have the Holocaust Memorial Service at 7:30. And that's my manager's report.
Great, thank you very much. Council reports. Susan?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. First, since my last council report, I detailed the planning board deliberations regarding the land use plan element of the master plan AH2, B3R, CR, and C zone districts. Board deliberations, previously noted to be Tuesday, April 7th, will actually be carried till Tuesday, April 21st, here at Village Hall in this courtroom. Please mark your calendars and refer back to the village website for any updates or changes to venue. It's also important to note a delay in information from the League of Municipalities pertaining to the recent court decision on affordable housing. That information hopefully will be available by April 20th in time for our April 21st meeting. These are complicated issues with the potential to permanently change our historic central business district. Again, mark your calendars, and the downtown housing element is moved to April 21st, 7:30 here at Village Hall. The Planning Board will meet on Tuesday, April 7th at 7:30 with a modified agenda to include a work session discussion of our master plan reexamination efforts. Because I don't get enough of this, I'm going to report on the Paramus Board of Adjustment meeting. This past Thursday night, March 27, I attended the Paramus Board of Adjustment meeting regarding a proposed adult daycare center facility at the corner of Paramus Road and Linwood Avenue. A number of our village residents attended since the proposal is on a site currently zoned residential and is located in squarely residential area, albeit close to a more commercial corridor. The application brings with it serious concerns regarding traffic impact in an already busy and congested corner, along with a very large structure seemingly out of place relative to the more modest surrounding homes. This bifurcated application seeks first a D or use variance requiring a 5 of 7 vote for approval. I think it's important for the village to monitor this particular application closely, as this already congested intersection is a main artery in and out of the village, impacts our residents living in the area, and especially impacts the corridor where emergency vehicles travel to our residents on the east side of Route 17. So I did go in the past. Paul and I have been on this discussion, and Matt, and our residents were very appreciative that someone was there with them, and I sat with a number of residents at the meeting, and they were appreciative that someone from Village Council was there by their side. This past Friday, Albert, actually, we had a meeting this past Friday at the Village Library that was attended by myself, Deputy Mayor Pucciarelli, Janet Frick, Tim Cronin, Nancy Green, Robin Ritter, and Janice Furman. We're working on addressing some of the parking issues that impact the library and the Village Hall parking lot when out-of-town teams come for sporting events. So we actually made great progress, and thanks to Janet Frick and Mike Barker, we already added a formal GPS address to the Graydon Lot South parking area, making it easier for visiting team players to locate the appropriate parking lot and thus not tying up this lot as much. We discussed renaming the Graydon South parking area to include Vets Field parking on the signage, and the group will be reviewing better signage options, ensuring appropriate lighting at all parking areas, and launching a parking education communication plan. During our discussion, it came to our attention that our village municipal complex parking spaces are being used by area businesses to supplement their own parking deficiencies. Staff from businesses are parking all day for free, tying up a number of parking spaces while they're at work. It's the recommendation of our village attorney to coordinate with the police department and engineering, and that we will do. This meeting was very productive. However, we got off to a shaky start with an earthquake tremor felt for about 45 to 60 seconds. This caused the building to shake and sway. An earthquake was recorded in Fairfield, New Jersey later that afternoon. While it was a bit unsettling, we just decided to continue working and let it slide. Great. Resident correspondence and communications. I actually took a page out of Roberta's playbook. Last week, several residents spoke up regarding safety concerns around the Ridge School area, focusing on crossing guards, traffic patterns, walkability of the neighborhood, in addition of sidewalks on Clinton Avenue. During the past week, I've received a number of emails, including one last night, signed off by about 8, I believe, residents, and we were all CC'd on that, requesting the installation of sidewalks immediately at the time of repaving on Clinton Avenue, a full reopening of Clinton Avenue for traffic and parking, and a halt on the repaving of Clinton until the above requests have been resolved. The letter being signed by several residents and other letters, along with public comments, reiterated this message. I understand that the mayor did forward this to the Citizen Safety Advisory Committee. However, I think with bids due on April 9th, I think we should seriously just contemplate this and maybe have a conversation about it, and maybe even place it for discussion on the April 22nd work session agenda. And let's just see. Okay, great. Okay. Apropos to the aforementioned, the League of Women Voters. A week and a half ago, I was invited to speak with the ladies of the League of Women Voters. I wanted to thank Crystal Masterbecker and the League for a wonderful opportunity to open up a dialogue about the mission of League founder Carrie Chapman Catt, and how that mission, born out of the women's suffrage movement, can be applied to our own village government. It was a chance to talk about better communication with residents and how best to engage village citizens on all matters before this council. We brainstormed effective methods used in the past of disseminating information about agenda items, ordinances, planning issues, etc. I believe communicating with residents and engaging the community and listening will result in a greater transparency with far more productive outcome. I look forward to working with the League to further explore these opportunities. And a final note, Federici update. The move and restoration efforts on the Gaetano Federici piece were seriously delayed due to the ongoing, seemingly never-ending winter and snow conditions. That being said, as warmer and drier weather prevails, the efforts will continue and will begin again within the next few weeks. I will coordinate with all those involved to ensure a safe journey for this historic village treasure. Thank you.
That's it.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was lengthy. I'm sorry.
You and Roberta are in competition now. Thank you, Susan. Albert?
Thank you. We also have a report from the library, though not nearly as earth-shaking. But the night before, there was a trustees meeting, and the library trustees meetings are really, I don't want to keep saying the same thing. They just run so smoothly. They really have their budget under control, and more importantly, the library itself is functioning very smoothly. But they're not content with the status quo. They have a strategic plan in the works to improve the facility over the ensuing years, mainly interior improvements to keep it fresh and modern and the kind of attractive facility that it has been for us since the renovation several years ago. They also are so well, as I said during the budget meeting, so well supported on a voluntary basis by our public, and that's because it's such a respected facility. People are willing to give above and beyond what their tax dollars contribute. So the Friends of the Library, their report is presented at the trustees meeting, as is the report of the Library Foundation. Both of those organizations really supplement very, very well and in a very targeted way the programs of the library. While that meeting was taking place, the Ridgewood Arts Council met, and I haven't figured out how to be at both meetings, so they met without me, but they've asked me to deliver this report verbatim. It comes from Linda Bradley, who is the chair of the Ridgewood Arts Council. Number one, visit and please use, whether to post events or to check out Ridgewood happenings, our interactive arts calendar at rac.ridgewoodnj.net. 2, please consider donating a piece of art that any Ridgewood artist, past or present, has created to our major installation entitled Ridgewood Art at Village Hall. Purpose of the installation is to celebrate the wealth of artistic talent in Ridgewood. Art can be any medium, mobile sculpture, textiles, fine art, and photography included. Details are found on the website if you want to know more about it. And again, you can email the Arts Council at that same website address. 3, please join the Arts Council on April 21st, that's a Thursday at 8 p.m. Is it a Thursday? I'm not sure. Anyway, on April 21st at 8 p.m. in the Senior Lounge for a delightful introduction to the Ridgewood Arts Council. At that point, the members of the council will just be there to tell you about the Arts Council. It's a Tuesday, April 21st, 8 p.m. in the Senior Lounge. And finally, number 4, consider becoming a trustee of the Ridgewood Arts Foundation, which exists in structure to support the works of the Ridgewood Arts Council. but is in need of an active and engaged independent board to assist in fundraising for the arts. Thank you.
Thanks, Albert. Gwen?
Okay. I had a Fields Committee meeting scheduled for Wednesday, but it was postponed due to the school's vacation and the fact that so many people were out of town. So anyone who would like to attend next Wednesday, it's 7 a.m. in the morning at the Board of Ed building on the top floor. And the topic of discussion is going to be parking in the municipal lot and how the sports groups affect parking. So that, if you're interested, you're welcome. Also, I don't know if this was on your agenda. Are you going to talk about March 31st? Roberta's one-year anniversary.
Oh.
I'll leave that for the mayor.
So yesterday was Roberta's one-year anniversary. What a strange trip it's been.
I have to tell you, I haven't had that many surprise parties in my life. I've had a couple, like for my 50th birthday, my 40th birthday, and I was never surprised at those surprises. I knew. But I have to tell you, these guys did such an amazing job. I was totally, absolutely floored. I was. It was great. Thank you. Thanks for the support.
Thank you. Thanks for a great year.
As a council person, I would like to acknowledge the difference in our village since you got here and to thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you.
Yeah, really, it has been extraordinary. You really have stepped it up, and I mean, we hear from residents all the time. Sometimes we joke about it, but we do. I mean, the level of service, the level of detail, your obvious passion and energy that you bring to this job. I know the professionals that work in the village feel it. I know the residents feel it. I know us on the council feel it. So, thank you.
Thanks. I said yesterday, this is probably the funnest job I have had. It's fun, but I think it's, we have serious work to do. And I want to make sure that we continue focusing on serious work. And also, one of the things I've been feeling lately as I look, it's interesting coming in from the private sector into the public sector and taking a different perspective. And I do think, stereotype stories that the public sector is not as efficient as the private and vice versa. Really, each side could learn from each other and their best practices. I think there are best practices across both. But there are frustrations in dealing with municipal government that sometimes you don't see in the private sector, and I don't want to talk about, I don't want to talk about civil service again, but civil service is one of them. It's the complexities and the inability to get stuff done. But the other thing is also, I find, when you're in the private sector, one of the things that indicates that you're a best-in-class organization is that you don't respond to what we used to call as fire drills, to this kind of thing, because what was happening in the private sector is if you did that, it really meant that you didn't have processes in place. And as a result, you started getting schlepped off, pulled off of things that you should be working on. And so and I've been talking to the management team about this a little bit, and I think one of our goals going forward is that we really do focus on the important 10 or 12 things. And we're going to have to say to certain things, we need to hold off a little bit until we get this other stuff done. And it's not because, I think it's because to some degree we want to respond to residents, we want to respond to requests, we want to respond to council members, but what happens as a result is we don't necessarily get to where we want to go on things. So I'm going to be looking for the council to help us to achieve that, because, we just get waylaid. And so that would be all I have to say.
Good.
Thank you. And let me thank, Susan and Mike weren't here, but let me thank Paul and let me thank the three of you for taking a chance.
One of us was left out.
Who? What?
You said, I want to thank the three of you, having mentioned Gwen, Paul, and Susan. Thanks.
No, I'm sorry. Paul and Gwen. No, I meant the three. Let me thank Susan wasn't on the council then, for hiring me and taking a chance, because there were some that said that you needed municipal experience to run it. There have been examples of municipal managers in other municipalities that have not had municipal experience. But I just want to thank you, because it's been a real pleasure for me to serve. It's really been a pleasure for me to serve the community. And I hope I'm doing a good job. I'm trying.
Yeah, you definitely are. And again, the level of customer service has just skyrocketed, and so thank you for that.
And thank the staff again. I want to thank the staff again. They've been great.
Just a couple of things. You mentioned paving, and you mentioned potholes. I just want to thank you and your folks for making this a priority, because there are few issues more so than sort of street repairs, street paving, potholes, that have both a quality of life and a public safety imperative, and it is a very serious thing, and I'm glad it's a top priority of yours, and we know it's a top priority of ours, and so thank you for that. And the other thing is, just mention I have office hours this Saturday.
Oh, that's right.
My kid does not play crew, so anyway. With that, we will go to public comments, questions, comments, thoughts, suggestions.
Each person is limited to 5 minutes.
Good evening, welcome.
Good evening, Ann Loving, thank you. 342 South Irving Street. I had a question about the water. It was described that there's all these little leaks all over the place, and I don't really understand the water. I envision it sort of like the human circulatory system. If there's a hole in a pipe, is there always positive pressure so that water is going out of the pipe into the surrounding environment, or can microbes and whatever come into the water if there's not pressure? Is it a way for the water to become contaminated when it's leaking, or is the flow always out?
It's a good question. I don't know if you know, but
No, I'm going to have to, he could answer that more articulately than I could.
Do you have anything else, Ann, or do you want to?
I have nothing else. Okay. No, I just, it's when this description of little leaks all over the place, I thought, oh God, I wonder, if anything comes in. That's my only question.
Thank you. Welcome back.
It's real simple. Yes. The pressure is always going out, so the contamination can't come in.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Hi, Boyd Loving, 342 South Irving Street. Just my 2 cents about the water. There was a question about the value of it and whether there is any value because it's water that we're not selling. I guess my concern is that there are some years in which we buy water because we are not able to produce enough water. So if there are leaks at the same time that we are buying water, certainly the value of the water that's leaking has got to be equal to whatever we're buying water at per gallon. So in terms of trying to figure out what the worth is, if we are purchasing water at the same time water is leaking, we're losing money. I know Mr. Schreibner is going to try to put together some sort of report on what the value is, but you might want to take into account any water that we do purchase as well. I just had a quick question about the armored car service. I know that the report that came back from the auditor concerning the coin theft talked about a 48-hour deposit, and I remember the manager making a comment that there was some discussion as to whether that applied as far as the coinage was concerned. I'd just like to know what the village's position is as to whether there is a requirement on the state requirement to deposit within 48 hours, or because it's coins going into the meter, we feel as though that isn't a requirement, and that's why we went to a 1-week pickup as opposed to a 48-hour pickup.
The requirement that was in the audit report was when we picked up the coins. 48 hours later, it should be in a bank, basically, right? That's what you're referring to?
Yes.
Right? So with this new scenario, what happens is the coins get collected on Monday, they get picked up on Tuesday, they're in the bank on Wednesday. That's the goal. Having said that, if coins are wet, they have
did you say?
Wet. If they're wet, they have moisture. If they're wet, I'm sorry. If they're wet, they have to dry out. And so that will delay the deposit to the bank. My understanding is that that's not a problem because there's really nothing you could do about it until you dry them, because you can't count them unless they're dry. But so the process now will be Monday, Wednesday to the bank. I mean, the thought is, the sooner you get the money to the bank, the safer it is, obviously.
Well, the good news is they're going to be in lock canisters now, so that makes it a little bit more difficult for anybody to walk away from it.
Remember, it's only for the single head meters.
Oh, right, okay, sorry, just for the single head meters. Okay. As I stand here, I see my friend's name on the podium. It's been almost a year since he departed us. He and I used to sit around on his front porch, talk about the council regularly. And, he used to come to the meetings with me. And every once in a while, we'd go to a meeting and we'd say, I never thought I'd see that, or I never thought I'd hear that. Well, tonight certainly was one of those that I never thought I'd hear that. And just when you thought you'd heard everything, you hear something that you just can't believe. When I go into the voting booth, I don't see Roberta's name. I don't see Matt Rogers' name. I don't see Heather's name. I don't see Beth Hinsdale's name. I see the name of people who are running for office who I want to represent me. I want those people to have all the information that is necessary for them to do their jobs. I view you as the board of directors of the corporation. If this were a private corporation and you found out that somebody deliberately withheld information from you, at a minimum, that requires a discussion with the person. Perhaps it requires more. So if this instance of somebody deliberately withholding information or directing somebody to deliberately withhold information.
I have to step in. I'm sorry. You're making an accusation.
I'm not making an accusation. That's what was said.
I just would ask you to...
I said if it turns out that this is factual, I think a conversation needs to be held with that person. Again, when I go into the voting booth, I'm looking for somebody to represent me, and it's my expectation that that person is given whatever information is necessary to run the corporation. If people aren't giving you information for whatever reason, it requires a discussion. That's all I'm saying. I'm not making an accusation.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I have to tell you, I have worked now here for 6.5 years. I've worked with different village managers. I've worked with Matt Rogers. I've worked with Heather Maylander. I've worked with Beth Hinsdale. They are some of the best professionals I've ever worked with. They have integrity, and for it to constantly be questioned, I just think it's inappropriate, and I think we need to be careful. These are folks who are doing their job. We may not always agree with them, and we go back and forth, all of us, and that's good. That's healthy. But I think when you start to question their integrity and when you start making accusations about them withholding information, I think we're crossing a line.
Ms. Aronson, I was basing my comments on what was said here this evening. I'm not making any accusations on my own. Again, my comment is that I vote for people to represent me. It is my expectation that they have information. If you are not getting the information because somebody is withholding it from you, my view is it requires a discussion with the person. I'm not making any accusations up here. So please, listen to what I'm saying, okay? I'm basing my comments on what was said at the dais tonight. Okay, thank you very much.
Can I actually, I would like to make a point here. Just to clarify this, I'll confer with counsel to make a determination as to whether or not the emails need to be released, and that will actually just tell what needs to be told. Thank you.
Good evening.
Bernadette Walsh, 444 Red Birch Court. So I have two things to talk about tonight. So the first thing is, I don't know if the deputy mayor had a chance to talk to the Board of Ed about the busing issue.
No, I saw a response to you, and I had asked, actually, I remember asking the village manager, I said, oh, is that the response to Councilwoman Walsh, former Councilwoman Walsh? And I thought actually that was the response. So when I saw that,
I don't know what response you're talking about.
Anyway, if there's more information, Bernie, please let me know, and I will certainly take it.
Yeah, I don't know what response you're talking about.
Oh, there was email.
What is the issue? If you could just...
Oh, I'm sorry. So the Board of Ed has denied private school students busing,
right,
even though they changed the law because of a hazardous condition for public school students.
And then I saw correspondence between you, Roberta, it was over a month ago, between you and Dan Fishbein, and I thought...
I think. don't hold me on this, because I'm not deliberately doing this. Don't hold me on it. I think it was in a meeting. We have our monthly Board of Ed meetings with
Right,
Dan.
which I attend.
And I think at that meeting, it was Dan that shared that email, that response. He shared it with someone. I just don't
Obviously not-
recall. I don't
not with you.
recall.
Are you talking about the response from September?
I don't remember.
this
But there
was-
was a response, I think, that Dan said was done from the Board of Ed to, I guess it was you.
Yeah, so the Board of Ed sent a response in September saying that they've afforded the privilege of safety to public school students
Yeah.
only.
And I think at that meeting, Dan was standing by, I mean, my interpretation of that meeting was Dan was standing by that
Yeah, but
email.
obviously, we didn't close the loop with you, and that's something we should.
Right, so myself and the other,
I will
our
take
family
that
and the
up.
other families were looking for the support from the council for our next steps in terms of leveling the playing field and making sure that it's safe for all children to get to and from school, because right now it is not safe.
Okay.
And it's, you guys all know where I live, so picture this. They're expecting my daughter, my 15-year-old daughter, to walk down Glen, circle around by the Shell station, walk down the highway, go under, over Paramus Road, and around. And that's just our route. There's other, girls that are doing that route as well.
What school does she go to?
Immaculate Heart Academy. So that's why I said myself and the other families were hoping that the village council would support us in going back to the Board of Ed.
And she walks all the way to Immaculate Heart Academy at this point, or?
That is the route that the school has determined she would walk to school every day.
But walk all the way to the school?
To school, from school. I mean, you got to get both ways.
Okay. All right,
But
well-
the challenge is they've deemed that dangerous for public school students.
Okay. Well, I will take it on again.
Okay, good. And the other question I had related to the amnesty. So I think you guys all know I do global mobility. I buy and sell hundreds of houses a year for my transferees. And the property disclosure that they have to fill out specifically asks if any work you've done has been permitted and has been done to village code or to any municipal code. So the amnesty, I'm guessing, is going to have them, when they fill that form out to sell their house, is going to be void, or they're going to have a challenge. So I guess if you're giving them amnesty for something they did without permits.
Well, I don't know, Bernie, if that's definitely going to be the case. Maybe in certain ones it is, but I think, as you know, what happens, even when that seller's disclosure gets filled out and the answer is given in the affirmative that everything's been done according to all state and local codes, that there are sometimes still open permits left that have not been closed out. And what's become incumbent upon buyers is to find out if there are any open permits. This is...
So the amnesty is not to give them the pass on the permit, correct?
No, what this is, from what I understand, this is to give those, not necessarily in a house sale, but certainly it may come up in a transaction.
It could.
But it could come up for somebody who's just staying there. The opportunity to come in, get inspections on work that was done without permits, without getting summoned or, being, getting some type of a legal challenge of the fact that they did it without the proper permits.
I mean, we have had a couple in the last week or so, a couple of issues of this nature where, they've come back in and said, mea culpa, we should have done this. So what we're saying here is let's try to fix this problem now.
Right. But you're not giving amnesty for somebody who knowingly did something and didn't get the permit, correct?
What we're saying is, so for example, we have 650 permits that were never picked up.
That were never picked up or
Yeah,
never...
they were applied for but never picked up. So that would indicate to us that some of that work got done, right? And the permit was not picked up. And those have been sitting there for a while. So it was the idea, we said, if that's the case, there's probably other work that got done in the village. And some of it, frankly, I hate to say this, but some of it, frankly, was the fact that some folks just didn't want to deal with the building department, because of all the red tape and how long it takes and all this stuff. And, and so the point here is let them come forward now let's fix it, let's do the inspection, we'll send our inspectors out, we'll make sure it's done according to code. If it's not, they're going to have to fix it, make it
Okay.
safe for everybody. That's the, so I
Yeah,
don't
that
know
was
if
the only thing, because when I was listening, it wasn't clear whether they were going to get a pass if they never got a permit, or if the amnesty was going to be just to those that were permitted and never maybe did the final inspection or never did.
From what I understood, it was going to be to everybody.
Yeah, it's everybody.
It's going to be to
Even
everybody.
those who never applied, they could
Right.
come in, people who did work on their own, who never applied for permits.
Right.
Could come in and then apply for the permit, have the inspection, and get it taken care of without. And it may be that they're doing it in advance of selling their house,
Or not.
but
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments? All right, motion to go into closed session.
Be resolved by the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood that the Village Council meet in closed session on April 1st, 2015 at 7:30 PM or soon thereafter as a matter on the agenda can be reached, and that said closed session be held in the caucus room on the 4th floor of the Ridgewood Village Hall, 131 North Maple Avenue, Ridgewood, New Jersey, and be it further resolved that the matters to be discussed in closed session are limited to personnel matters, appointment of village auditor. These matters are allowable under NJSA 10:4-12 et sec, and be it further resolved that the minutes of this meeting shall be made available to the general public when such matters have been deemed completed by resolution of the Village Council. May I have a motion?
So moved?
Second.
Who moved it?
Albert.
I'm sorry. I thought you did. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank
Yes.
you.
Good night, everybody.